Hey, Ayo, what's up, bro? What's up?
Hey, I need your help with something.
Well, what do you need my help with, bro?
So, I was doing some talking over the PlayStation with some of my American buddies, right?
Oh, all right, all right.
And they hit me with the most random question. Right?
All right, what's that
Are you
question?
ready for this?
Yeah, I'm ready, I'm ready.
What makes Canada Canada?
What makes Canada Canada? Well, I
And
mean, that's a
I,
tough
I
one.
yeah, I kind of hesitated for a second. It was like, all right, hang on, I got you. I'm gonna make a video on this.
All right,
So, I thought I'd
so,
get one of my Canuckian buddies to help me with that. And judging by your
Canuckian.
background, I'd assume what could go
Oh,
wrong.
yeah, that's Filbert. That's my pet goose. All right. But the question is, what makes Canada Canada, right?
Yeah.
I mean, one could very easily argue it's the wildlife or the food, but personally, I would argue it's definitely the people. What
And what exactly about the people makes you say that?
what exactly about the people makes me say it's Canada? There's just a certain mannerism I notice Canadians have. I don't know whether it's a cultural thing or what it is, but there's just a certain mannerism about Canadians that it's very tough to describe. I wouldn't necessarily call it loving or like open and embracing, but it's definitely very apparent.
Hmm. And what else would you say? Because I know like a lot of Americans think that we just start talking like this, bud. Like, sure, the
Oh yeah.
accent comes out occasionally, but like,
Oh man.
we're not always talking like, "Hey, hoser, how's it going there? You got your double deadly there?"
Well, I mean, other than that, I think definitely a big part of it is how the world views us in stereotypes. Like now that you bring it up, a lot of being Canadian is talking about how Canada is perceived on the global scale. So a lot of it is just talking to, as you say, your American buds and kind of figuring out what they think because I feel like in a lot of ways we do encompass some of those identities.
Oh, for sure. Like, um, sometimes they'll give us the stereotypes, like, how's the igloo going there? And you'll look
Oh,
outside and realize it's -40 out there. Like, you're basically living inside of one. It's freezing outside, but warm as hell on the inside.
basically. I guess something else, if we're going to be talking about a bit of those darker kind of subjects, part of what makes us Canadian is our history. And it's not necessarily what makes us as people Canadian, but what makes Canada Canada is our history and what we built this country on. And I would argue that based on history, we built this country on the blood and on the backs of what's the word that I'm looking for? Marginalized. I think that's the correct term of marginalized peoples. We've done horrible things to Indigenous peoples, and we continue to do horrible things to Indigenous peoples, and a lot of that just gets swept under the rug. Whether it be the fact that we can't provide everybody with clean water, or whether it be the fact that things like the Starlight Tours happened. The
Yeah,
that all definitely has an impact on Canadian identity and is something that a lot of Canadians shy away from talking about.
yeah, because I'll be honest, like, it's kind of embarrassing that as someone who's lived in Canada for all their life and that this stuff like this is only just now getting figured out. Like, there are still God knows how many things, how many bodies, how many unmarked graves, just the dark side of it.
Oh
Like, there's
yeah.
so much to be uncovered still
Uh,
because we don't know all what happened.
well, yeah. I mean, when you're talking with friends, it's obviously the funny way. Oh, ha ha! Look, I'm Canadian hoser. I got my double double here on a double double. Got them McCaffrey. Blah, blah, blah. You know, you have that thing. But I feel like if someone genuinely asks you what is Canadian identity, I feel like it's a lot better to talk about Canadian identity in a darker way, simply because I don't think we're at a point in our national identity where, and I don't think we'll ever be at this point, where these events are separable from Canada, because these are part of our history and these are continued parts of our history. As we go on, more things are happening. A lot of people like to act like colonization is over. It isn't. Colonization is absolutely not over. It's continuing on and still going on. There are things like the Indian Act and Bill C-31, which, while giving Indigenous women back status, also has all these other things baked into it. So we can't. There's two things we can't do. We can't act like colonization is over, and we also can't act like Canada is this fucking glowing beacon. You muted your mic. uh, you're not making any noise there, Luminous. I guess you're deafened.
There we go.
There.
My cord's being buggy, but yeah, no.
Oh yeah, fair
it's not
enough.
China rainbows. Like there's times where we can joke around. Oh, our army's just snowmen with AKs and stuff like that. But in reality, you can't fray away from the dark side of it. That will always be a part of your history, and the best thing you can do is just look and learn
Oh yeah,
to not have the
I
same
mean,
things happen the exact same way. Because if history's taught me one thing, history with good old Patty, like history does repeat itself. It always has, and it always will.
oh yeah, and I honestly think that that if we're gonna stray away from like answering the question to an American what it means to be Canadian, I think what it should mean to be Canadian to Canadians is forever learning. And I'm going to be completely honest. I think there's a flawed way of looking at solving these issues. A lot of people attempt to change the mind of those who already have minds set, when I think instead, as a nation, we need to focus on educating the youth about these things. So and this is going to start getting into my own personal beliefs, I think things like Indigenous Studies courses should be mandatory. Like, you don't have a choice. You should take them, because I think part of having a less ignorant populace is teaching them about these things. In my Indigenous Studies course, this quad actually, one of the things that was being talked about a lot was, why would a lot of teachers fail a basic Indigenous Studies test? And that's just simply because they never taught. It's not necessarily entirely their fault that they're ignorant. Sure, there's a little bit of willful ignorance that everybody does need to confront, but it's not necessarily the teacher's fault that they're ignorant, because a large part of that ignorance is the fact that nobody sat down and taught them these things.
Yeah. There's so many ways you can approach that problem. Some of the more simpler solutions would to be like, remove the Indigenous Studies as a whole and have it integrated to like a 50-50 type thing between your normal history, That way you're learning a bit of both. But either that, or like you said, make Indigenous Studies a mandatory class and have history as an optional.
Oh yeah, I honestly, like, if I'm gonna get deep into this, the way that I think it should work, honestly, is that you should have some of this integrated into history. A lot of it should be integrated into history, but you can't have like the focus that this needs in a history course when you're doing a bunch of other things, because simply put, there's too much to go over in a history course, because you're talking about European history, which I do think that something to criticize history courses for is they seem very Eurocentric. They seem very centered on Europe, which, I mean, and depending on your perspective, that may not necessarily be a bad thing. But if that's going to remain the case, either I think some things do need to be talked about when it comes to kind of the themes that Indigenous Studies kind of talks about, more so than just like, oh yeah, residential schools happened, residential schools are bad. No, we need to get deep into these things. There are a lot of people who still don't know exactly what the Indian Act is, or what Bill C-31 is, or all these things. And people need to learn what these things are. It's absolutely, in my opinion, essential to have Canadians understand where Canada is, why it is where it is, so that they can truly like what's the word I'm looking for? So that they can truly know their Canadian identity and know our understand and comprehend identity.
Yeah. I mean, you say that history's kind of more shifted towards European, or centralized around the European history.
Oh, yeah.
And like, I can understand why, like a lot of it, like, we technically did come from Europe, unless you're of course Métis or First Nations. But like, I understand what you mean there, but like, it really should be more in, because as Europeans technically they did force they forced those acts, so I don't understand why it's not taught at all in history. So I completely agree with you there that everyone should and know what, or should know what those acts are and whatnot.
Oh yeah, a lot of people don't even know the true story of Christopher Columbus. Like, Columbus Day is still a thing, and I personally think that's very flawed to have Columbus Day still be a thing. You don't celebrate your conqueror. That's how I would put it. Like, a lot of people don't know that when Columbus first landed on Turtle Island, the population that he encountered, he completely wiped them out. Like, they don't exist anymore. And that is because he saw that they had gold. And because of the fact that they had gold, he's like, I want this gold. So you know what he did? He would go up to them. He would have these these coins. I think they're modified coins that had like a date on them. In 3 months' time, they had to bring him like a bag or something of gold. And if they didn't meet their gold quota, he cut off their fucking hands.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people don't know that ever happened.
Yeah, like, people tend to look past the dark side. Like, how do I explain it? It's almost like Canadians this day and age are almost more afraid to confront their past than they are to face it.
Well, yeah.
And that's the true sad part of it. Like, you'll never learn if you're always running from it, as opposed to properly facing it. Like, I haven't been paying much attention to it anymore since I don't really pay attention much to the news and all that, but like, I'm not sure if the church or anything like that has gotten in trouble at all for the just recently discovered graves or anything like that. So like, like, people have to realize that what they did was wrong, but not everyone realizes, and some people don't even know exactly why other people would be saying that what they did was wrong, because they don't know exactly what happened.
Well, yeah, and that's you talking about the church is a perfect segue into another thing, which is Canada now, which we still have lots of issues. If I actually open up a web browser and go into my browsing history for my own project, my own project here, I was doing some research here. Hold on. I will open up this web page. But for my own project, I was doing some research on like contemporary issues, like stuff that's happening now. And it's kind of staggering. As we kind of alluded to earlier, there's the water, there's the clean water, but that's only a very small part of it, unfortunately. You know how, and this is going to segue kind of back into talking with your American friends. You know how a lot of the time we say, you got to pay for your health care. You get shot, you're going to pay for it, right?
Yeah.
And while that is true, and while that's a strong point we have, we can't act like our healthcare system is incredible. In 2008, an Indigenous man named Brian Sinclair died in a Winnipeg emergency room. Do you know the story?
No, I don't actually.
Brian Sinclair, he had a urinary tract infection, was having a diabetic reaction in the emergency room. He's this Indigenous man in a wheelchair, 2008, and he died in that ER because the nurses, everyone around, assumed he was drunk, had nowhere else to go, or was homeless. They basically let him die because their preconceived notions of an Indigenous man got in the way of them going and figuring out what's happening with this guy who's in the ER. And he died right there. That is the Canadian healthcare system for you.
Yeah, like, I guess it kind of ties into like the whole fact of like racism and stuff. Like,
oh yeah.
It's such a large gap to fill, to reconcile with what we did. Hell, like, I'm not saying like, God, how do I word this? Like, what we did to them, how they retaliated. Both sides, fucked up, but in the long run, it was us that caused it all. Like, the people who were trying to colonize this area, we were the ones that kind of were the catalyst to it all. And it really is a shame, because it takes so long to reconcile for that, and it's not getting any better. If anything, I'd say nowadays it's just getting worse and worse. And yet, to the outside, all the media and stuff, they're covering only the good stuff, pretty much, of what's happening.
Oh yeah, that's another thing to criticize, and that's getting really deep into a lot of stuff when you start bringing up media. But honestly, I think the focal point and the takeaway from an open dialogue like this should be, as much as Canada has this idealistic way of looking at ourselves, we have this very idealistic, very centric, if you will, like center of the world way of looking at ourselves, like we're superior to our neighbors. I think that's something that needs to go away, because I don't feel comfortable calling us better than the United States when things like this have happened in our history, and we're refusing to talk about them and act like we're on this moral pedestal. And that's one of the reasons that something like this, and I'm going to help you on your project here. That's the reason something like this, open dialogue, is very good. And that's the reason why people need to start talking with each other. White people, indigenous people, doesn't matter your skin color, open dialogue has no drawbacks to it. Sure, sometimes you might leave feeling uncomfortable. Sure, sometimes you might leave feeling upset or anything, right? But that's good. That means the dialogue impacted you in some way. You might be angry, you might be whatever, but if an open dialogue caused that, that means that that dialogue somehow resonated with you, or you're even more firm in your current belief. Either way, there was something that resulted from that open dialogue.
Yeah. And like when it comes to that stuff, you kind of got to divide, the popularity into, two sides. You got the people that realize that we're not better than everyone else. Going back to what you said about how there's people that think that, like, there are people that think we are just at the utmost top,
Nationalists.
Yeah,
Yeah.
egocentric.
Yeah, I
Like
wouldn't say
a lot of Canada's
egocentric. I would say
yeah.
more so very prideful of a nation for no reason. Like that's a lot. That's a lot harder to say than egocentric, because I don't quite want to say nationalist, because I think that's attaching a label that is far too extreme. Patriotic, overtly patriotic. That's what we're looking for.
Yeah. Like, don't get me wrong. I guess you could say I'm somewhat guilty of that, but usually when I say that, I'm always in a joking tone of voice, like, "Oh yeah, no, I'm so much better than you guys," talking to my PS4 buddies and whatnot. But realistically speaking, everyone should realize, like, everyone's had their mistakes. It's how they deal with them
Oh yeah,
and how
absolutely.
they bounce back after their mistakes to reconcile. Some might say, some might refuse to believe that they messed up. Others will pay money. And like the real sad part is very few will truly take the time and effort to reconcile, say sorry and make up for what they've done.
Well, yeah,
Meet demands that they make instead of us making our own demands.
yeah, and I think that's a perfect closing note. This refusal to reconcile by some is damaging not only to the people who we need to reconcile to, but also overall to the same Canadian identity that they're claiming to so vehemently defend. And I think that's a perfect closing note, because this call has gone on for like 18, 20 minutes, and I'm sure Mr. Kaywood doesn't want to sit through half an hour of us talking about Canada.
Oh, bro, we go 4 hour long podcast just ranting on about our mistakes.
All right. Well, I mean, it was nice talking to you, man. I guess I'll see you later.
Yeah, have a good one, man.